Fight.
Welcome back to the Two Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we're officially back. Just wanted to talk through a couple of things before we jump in here with Karl. Really appreciative of him and his ability to come on and just ask for 30, and we go an hour. But just wanted to catch you guys up to speed. Just out of the podcast space for a little bit here. Was doing a lot of game stories, recaps, things like that. If you've been following along, it's always at Trevor Everett on X right there in the bottom corner. For the YouTube audience, it's always linked in the bottom of the description as well. But just, not able to do podcasts with my new job. We can't really get into it, unfortunately, but just with a new job and never experienced end of year with this new job and the way it's structured, just not able to be around as easily. And then spending time with my family, just really enjoying basketball this year and just being able to take some time to absorb everything. And just be ready to roll for the new year. So just wanted to catch you guys up there. About a month off, but podcasts are back. They'll be as frequent as they can be, hopefully more than a week, once a week, depending on the week. Like I said, if you like the written content, the in-person, in-game scouting and recaps and blogs are always there. Two Pointers will have all kinds of coverage as well as we head over closer to NCAA tournament, as well as the NBA season ramps up. We'll have NBA midseason awards with Grayson coming up here in just a little bit in a few weeks. So stay tuned for that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And don't forget that our presenting sponsor, SeatGeek, you're always eligible for $20 off your first purchase. Link in the top of the description, whether you're going to basketball games, college, NBA, doesn't matter, sporting events, concerts. If you want to click the link in the top of the description, that'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Code 2 Pointers help support the show, help be able to bring stuff out to you. Like I said, apologies for the hiatus, but really glad and happy to have Karl back here. No Alex this time, but he's busy covering all that fun stuff in the Northeast. And shout out to Alex for all his work. But thank you to Karl again, and enjoy the interview. All right. We are joined today by Karl Heiser of the Gym Range podcast. You'll hear in the intro, this has been first pod back in a while. I kind of dove into what's going on and why, but we're back. That's what matters. College basketball is in the height of its season other than March. I think this kind of January, February, teams learning about themselves, teams starting to separate themselves is really fun. You'll see across the bottom of the screen, we've got a loaded 30-ish minutes here. Just some things that I've been wanting to talk about, and then some stuff at the end with TikTok. And I think Karl's got some good perspective on it and just the sports community as a whole. Before we jump into all that, reintroduce yourself to anybody that might be new here and what you've been working on.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Karl from the Gym Range podcast. So that's just my podcast. I do it with Alex Cervantes. We're on all platforms. We've also taken like a little bit of a hiatus too, but we're hoping to get back into it. We did some preseason stuff and have kind of fallen off just because of our respective jobs. But I do some writing as well for Busting Brackets and Vendetta Media, as well as just kind of my own independent stuff. I make videos on TikTok. I'm kind of all over the place, but I just love college basketball, and it's always good to be on the Two Pointers podcast. So.
And look, it's a busy job covering the Dartmouth athletics up there for Alex, excuse me. And hey, they had an opportunity to take down Princeton the other day, and Xavier Lee decided to just do what Xavier Lee does and then be an elite shot maker. So I'm sure he had a great time with that one. Xavier Lee is not a freshman. I couldn't figure out a segue, but we're going to talk about the elite freshman class just as a whole. I kind of want to lead into this. Evan Mia has some really great stuff out there. I just want to give Evan Mia a huge shout out. People who probably by now know who that is and what he does. But just the amount of guys, there's a statistic that Evan Mia uses, the Bayazon, I always forget how to mispronounce that. Performance rating is the sum of a player's offensive box plus offensive BPR and defensive BPR. It's the ultimate measure of a player's overall value to his team when he is on the floor. So defense, offense, etc. Right? Freshman rated at 10.36, which is Cooper Flagg. His next closest is 7.64. Is Con Cadimple, his teammate. So I just kind of gives you an idea how awesome they've been. There are, I want to make sure I have the right amount of guys. There are 48 people ranked above 3. in this ranking. Obviously, it's not very long withstanding, but even if you chopped it down to guys rated above 4, you're still 25 to 30 guys. The lowest of those guys above 4 being Flory Badunga at Kansas. So Igor Denman is like down near the bottom of that top 40 there. It's kind of crazy to think like a guy like that is even that low. I bring up all that to say like Thomas Sorber, Derek Queen, guys that are obviously right in your backyard. You can go wherever you want with this. But this is arguably one of the best freshman classes we've seen in college basketball history. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, I think if you go and look at any NBA mock draft that's come out recently, you'll see 20 freshmen in the first round. Like, it's ridiculous. And the fact that I think we had an idea coming in that, oh yeah, there's going to be a lot of really talented freshmen in college basketball this year. But then you kind of run into the question of, okay, well, are they all going to have, a big enough role? Like, are they going to shine? Like, are some of them going to have the freshman struggles? And so many of them have delivered. Like, it's ridiculous how awesome so many of them have been consistently. Like, you get past Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and then once you get past that, like, for me, making a top 10 freshman list is such a difficult task. Like, that's why I don't make lists, because it's such a difficult thing to do this year, because you really end up splitting hairs. Like, you get into it, it's like, yeah, Derek Queen, Thomas Sorber, Trey Johnson, Ian Jackson, Jeremiah Fears. Like, it's a ridiculous list of freshmen. Demon, Yakashonis, like, they've all had, I think, a game for the most part this year where it's like, okay, yeah, like that was their freshman game. Like, Kasparis had some foul trouble today, for better or worse. Like, I know that the refs were maybe not the best, but he finished with, I think, 3 points. Derek Queen finished with 3 points. He didn't look super great today. VJ Edgecombe has had some rough performances offensively, and I thought he was going to be awesome. But for the most part, the freshman class has just showed out. It has been fantastic.
I think your point about the guys at the top 2 is really interesting, because like I think it's kind of been the opposite. It's been the depth of the class. So your point about the NBA mock draft, I wanted to pull up one that I reliably trust, and that's No Ceilings NBA. Shout out to those guys. Their last one they did, it's been a little bit, January 8th. This is their version 3, according to them. And the first 12 picks were freshmen. The first 12. Yeah. The first guy at 13 is an international player. The guy at 14 is Colin Murray Bowles at South Carolina as a sophomore, so even young guy there. Next guy is Cam Jones. I mean, you kind of have a gap here, right? Then you go junior, and then Con Knippel at 17. So then it just immediately goes right back into Thomas Sorber, Boogie Fland. I mean, just immediately, international guy. Ian Jackson. I'm just going down the list. Alex Caravan. Carter Bryant is a freshman. Drake Powell, freshman. Like, the first senior that we got to is Nick Clifford at 26. So
they love Nick Clifford over at No Ceilings.
They always will.
Yeah.
And Danny Wolf Jr., but like I said, LeBaron Philon, I couldn't just search freshman, of course, because it's going to pop up all the time with this list, like in the description of the players. But basically, like you said, I think it's probably somewhere in the 20 to 23 players in this draft. Mock was freshman. Is there anybody that really surprised you coming into the year? I know you said Edgecombe kind of the other direction, Derek Queen, Sorber, all those guys kind of in your backyard there. But I mean, like I said, the depth is what really like throws me off. There's like, you start looking down the list of guys, like I'm just using the Seven Mia thing to help me filter just kind of impact of guys maybe I haven't seen as often, like maybe a Carter Bryant. Like, I watch Arizona, but the fact that he's in the top 15 in the statistics kind of interesting. But is there anybody that's kind of surprised you coming into the year?
Yeah, I mean, as far as freshmen go, like the two that really stood out to me, like, oh, I really didn't expect that, are Thomas Sorber at Georgetown. Like, I didn't know he'd have the immediate impact, and getting to watch him so frequently, like, I'm like, wow, like he is, I mean, their most important player by a lot of metrics. Like, I think Evan Mia, he might be over Micah Peavy in terms of BPR. Like, he's been supremely impactful. The other guy I did want to shout out is Tahad Pettiford, who is essentially the sixth man for the number 1 team in the country. And just the scoring that he provides off the bench, like, he adds just this extra dynamic that makes them so difficult to play. They just have this like collection of guards who all have different skill sets, like different things that they're good at, different matchups they can exploit. And just collectively, it's like so hard to have to game plan against when you kind of have that change of pace guy off the bench who dropped 24 yesterday.
To your point about PV, Sorber is 1, 2, 3, 4. Pettiford's third. For context, there he's been incredible. I think it was one of the guys from No Ceilings the other day, Corey, I believe, said something effective like Pettiford would be a lot in first round mocks if his handle was Pettiford with the shift or something like that.
I saw that. Yeah.
I was like, that was incredible, and he's probably right. But being left-handed, there's a lot of things that go into that, right? Being a freshman on, like you said, 6-man for the best team in the country, a lot of that stuff should matter more. But to your point about Sorber, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th, just behind Derek Queen on this list. I searched PV, and he is nowhere to be found in the top 50. So,
are you only looking at freshmen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just meant on Georgetown's team. Like Micah Peavy has been such a great two-way impact player, and like Thomas Sorber has been, I think, even more impactful.
The point is, I wanted this podcast to go in any direction, and so let's do it. Georgetown has been incredible. I do want to talk about them, and this is a good time since they have such a great freshman in Sorber. Overall ranking, it looks like, of guys that are. I just did Georgetown, and then I think it ranks every guy. Period.
Yeah.
And so PV's 215 and Sorber's 86. This is overall. The difference in their total average value is 5.9 to 4.61 for PV. So Sorber's been incredible. Georgetown as a whole, you've been at those games, you've been watching them. I mean, is this just like one big example of you have to give a coach time to build a program? Because I know they have a freshman immediate impact. Maybe he changes their whole season, but Ed Cooley's like any other coach. You give them 2 to 3 years, they're not going to turn the program around in year one. They're just not.
Yeah, last year was brutal. Like it was really difficult. Like it seemed at times like fans were checked out. Like you had Cooley just in timeouts. Like his team is huddled up and he's like sitting on the bench by himself. Like it just wasn't a good year. And a lot of people were just out on him. He's been kind of painted, I think, by the media as a villain in a lot of cases. I don't necessarily buy into like all of that. But this year it's like, like it seems like Georgetown is really had this resurgence this year where like fans are bought in. You go into Capital One Arena and it's not dead anymore. Like in these games, it was a Friday night game recently against DePaul, which they lost, which was unfortunate, but they're also down their top 2 scorers. So it kind of is what it is. But even then, like the fans were invested from, tip to finish. It was something to see. The game against UConn, the place was packed. It was bumping. People like love watching Georgetown basketball again, which is really cool. It didn't take nearly as long as I think a lot of people expected. Like that is a difficult rebuild, but this roster is really talented. They defend really well. Obviously Sorber hit right away. You have a guy like Micah Peavy who does like a little bit of everything. Epps and Mack have been a good backcourt when Epps is able to be on the floor. So it's been fun. I think they've lost 4 straight now. So a little bit on the downswing, but the Big East is tough. And with kind of the injury issues they've had, I think overall it's been definitely a positive season for Georgetown because now I think I tweeted this out earlier, but they've at a minimum achieved like not a doormat status. And I
think they're better than that. Yeah.
Like, that's a win. And they're even better than that, but I'm just,
if the floor is not a doormat, then you're 100% right. If the floor is not a doormat, you're 100% right. Like I was saying to somebody the other day, like a big Georgetown fan lives around here. I was like, other than like, the 1 year that we all remember doing, like they haven't been nationally relevant in my lifetime. Like for the most part, we're about the same age. So like you get the point, like living in the area, maybe that's a little different. I know they had those years when they were back in the old Big East, whatever. Sure. But like just in general, what this year means to the fact that they're like in NCAA tournament conversations, like middle of January, unheard of to a level that I don't think people understand. And that's what's been so fun about them. One guy before we move on from the freshman that I want to give just a conversation about here. Look, when you're Duke and you bring in Cooper Flagg, who's the second highest rated player in this metric we've been using here behind Jedi Broom, that's stupid. First of all, it's ridiculous. Yeah. But for Con Knipple to be this good this early, like I think Isaiah Evans was kind of the guy I think we were all excited about. Malawak from a defensive standpoint, sure. But like maybe I just didn't scout Knipple correctly. But for him to be the 13th best rated player in the country, according to this. Like, that's kind of insane. And that's actually he's probably just as big of a reason as why they've kind of come along as fast as they have and gotten into the flow of the season. Because he had some of those nights when early, and not many nights, but some of those nights they had off nights, Cooper Flag, whatever. Knipple's been incredible. He's been incredible and consistent the whole season. And I've really been surprised. So any thoughts on Knipple potentially?
Yeah, I mean, Alex had kind of clued me in when Alex was like doing workout in Wisconsin. Like he had kind of clued me into Knipple being a guy because he had gotten to watch some of him in high school. But yeah, like it's Duke historically, like they've had the freshmen, but to have like I don't know, it's such an interesting dynamic with this Duke team, I think, because like Flag is very obviously the guy. And I don't know, like if you go back, and maybe I'm just misremembering, but with the Zion RJ Cam team, was there like an obvious guy? Like what they were kind of all Cam was maybe like the number three, but like was it kind of Zion and RJ where
it was 1A, 1B from my
yeah,
understanding back then. I mean, I was always an RJ guy, that whole class, even going into the NBA, even still really am. I just thought he was that good. I thought the unique core set ability and the, just the length and the versatility. And I don't know, Steve Nash being your godfather is an advantage over a guy who doesn't have that. That has to matter. And he's been a good NBA player, but it was 1A, 1B. I mean, Barrett would have those random nights where he'd have 25 and it would be insane. But I mean, just from how the national landscape covers this sport, it was Zion or nothing. But from just an impact, to answer your question, it was 1A, 1B, I think, for a while there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I think like with Khan's, I don't think he's. It's interesting to see how high he ranks on that list because I don't like when I watch Khan, I don't think of him as like this super dynamic player because he has a very different skill set from like a Cooper Flag or one of the many other freshmen. But just seeing what his floor spacing like does for this Duke team, which is already super talented. Like they have a couple shooters, but he kind of is that guy who's responsible for spacing the floor. It just I think makes such a huge difference for opening things up for Cooper Flag, for opening things up for the other ball handlers on that team. It's and clearly, I mean, yeah, whatever numbers Evan Mia is running, like it clearly backs up Khan being a high impact guy. So I don't know. It's like a weird analytics eye test thing for me with Khan, where it's like
it is, but he's been really good.
Feel like he's having an insane impact, but like he is.
Mm-hmm. That's what's so interesting is like again, I think just from my perception coming into the season with him, like I just was not expecting him to be the second best player on this team. I mean, and that's through and through. People can argue, Malik Brown, who's now hurt for a little while. Mm-hmm. People can argue, I mean, you can argue that it's been maybe Proctor. I mean, of course, I'm going down the list in my head without looking, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody who's been incredible. But I mean, they're just deep. They're just a really deep team, and the fact that he really has been that good of a player, I think that's just the conversation around Khan coming in the year was just interesting compared to where I thought he would be this part through January. Speaking of surprises, obviously we do a preview every year around here, 21 questions, and I have a feeling I know where you're going with this. Ask you to go outside the box, but let's start with the idea of just perception, right? The idea of perception and the way we think about college basketball teams and players. You do all the research, you're excited about your thought process. Then we play the season, and then we go, what the heck happened, right? I know it's January, but we really start to know who some of these teams are now. Granted, you are going to have the occasional NC State just do exactly what they did, and we're all like, oh my God. But the point being is you just don't know, but through January, you kind of start to know. And so is there somebody you were really high on that's just worse that you're like, I don't get it?
I really thought Gonzaga was going to look the part of a national
I think everyone did.
Contender. Okay. I really did. Like I think I had them just outside the top 5 entering the season, and they just look so far from that. The pieces are there, like the roster's totally there. I stand by that kind of evaluation, but just in these these consecutive games, like the loss to Oregon State, the loss to Santa Clara. I don't think they've lost to Santa Clara at home since like 2007. And we're talking historic losses here for this
I
Gonzaga
think it
program.
was 2000. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
it might
I'd
have
have to
even
look.
been, so
I'd
it
have
might
to
have
look.
even been further back, but it's
They haven't lost
it's
back-to-back WCC games since 2014.
it's so bizarre to me. Like they opened the season with such a bang, dominating Baylor by 40 points, and since then they just haven't, for the most part, really looked the part of a national title contender, which I was kind of hoping they would be a sneaky title contender. So that's one team that I've definitely been pretty disappointed by. Baylor's got to be up there. Like I had gone to bat for Baylor in our preseason preview, and they also have just like the defense is once again not very good, which probably should have seen that coming. Trying to think who else. I thought Miami was going to bounce back, be like 5th or 6th in the ACC, and they're just a complete dumpster fire. Part of that is Larinaga is gone, but complete disaster.
They were bad before, though. They were.
No, they were even bad before, but it's kind of hit a whole new level with the retiring of Coach L. But yeah, even before it was really bad. They're taking Q3 and Q4 losses all day long. There's one other one that I was thinking of that I was like, wow, they're just not as good as I thought they were going to be.
Why are you thinking about it? I'm just looking for the thing. Your stat was what? That the Gonzaga has not lost to Santa Clara since when?
It was like they haven't lost a home game to Santa Clara since like 2007, I wanted to say, but
all right. Let me find
I could
it.
be wrong.
Let's see. I'm pulling it up now. They have not. I don't have it. So think of your while I'm pulling this up. Any other teams necessarily or expanding on one of those? Okay, actually, you know what? I'll ask you this because Gonzaga, like, it's twofold. Is it hit the panic button on this season, or is it hit the panic button on Mark Few in the next 3 to 5 years? Like, are you selling Mark Few stock?
I'm not selling Mark Few stock. No, I'm not. When you talk about, I mean, we're at, I forget what the number is. I should know the number off the top of my head because it's ridiculous. But the just consecutive Sweet 16 appearances, like there's really been nobody more reliable than Mark Few when it comes to getting to the tournament and winning tournament games. Obviously, they haven't won the big one yet, hopefully yet. But I can't just after this one year where again, like the roster is there on paper. Like it's not like he assembled this terrible roster. It's just they're not delivering. And maybe that does fall on Mark Few, but I'm not really selling Mark Few stock after. And things still have to play out. Like I don't know. I'm not saying throw in the towel in the season. So, and I did find the Santa Clara stat from their.
I was trying my best. I was doing everything I could to find it.
From their basketball Twitter page. It was
that makes sense.
First win in Spokane since 2007. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And there were some other ones out there. You can go down the list. Like first time since 2010-11 that Gonzaga suffered back-to-back losses twice in a season. Like the insanity of these just get crazier the more you read them because like you could continue to pluck them out of the air. I get it, but like Gonzaga's win is Santa Clara's first, or Santa Clara's win at Gonzaga is its first versus a top 25 team on the road since December 4th of 1993. That was Steve Nash versus Jason Kidd and Cal. Like again, these just get nuttier and nuttier every time.
Yeah. Which is part of why, like, that's part of why I'm not really selling Mark Few. And there's still time to turn the ship around. So we'll see.
Okay. So like the idea, not a bracketologist here, but the idea Gonzaga gets in the tournament, you would be able to look past you wouldn't be able to look past all of what this season's results have been and like start to pick them. Like last year, they were kind of that weird, like everyone thinks they're going to do this. And they did. They made the Sweet 16 last year. Did they not? So it's like, the streak continues, and yet we had questions about them last year, and those seemed a lot more dire. They basically changed their whole season when they won at Rupp. So, I mean, like, would you do the same thing? Would you get them in front of yourself in a bracket and go, yeah, you know what? I'm willing to put it all aside. They're in the tournament. Let's figure it out. Like, I just don't feel like we've reached that point with them yet.
Maybe not with this specific team because, I mean, you look at the last two games, they're giving up 97 and like 106 to Oregon State and Santa Clara. That's not great. That's definitely a concern. But at the end of the day, like they still have Ryan Nembhard, they still have Nolan Hickman, they still have Green EK down low. And I think those things matter when you're talking about, can this team win games in the tournament? Like, just get there. Like, part of me wants to think they're just like sleepwalking until they get there and then they'll turn it on, which is obviously a dangerous thing that you don't want to like bet on necessarily. But I don't know. I'm not totally out on Gonzaga. I've just been pretty disappointed by them.
I mean, if you're Bulldog faithful here, this is what you're clinging to. It's a overtime loss by less than 10 to West Virginia, who's been incredible, right? All these wins have basically aged poorly is going to be my point, or aged well is going to be my point. No good losses, I think, is like the old expression, but 1 point overtime loss in a semi-home environment to Kentucky. Let's just call a spade a spade. That was a home game. It just was. Yeah. When you play within 100 miles of a team's campus, it's a home game. Yeah. I don't care what anyone says. Connecticut, they lost by 6, semi away. UCLA, they lost by 3, semi away. Notice how none of these are at home. Notice how literally none of these are. Again, I made the excuse for the Kentucky one, but Oregon State away in overtime. Santa Clara by 5 at home. It didn't feel like it was like Santa Clara throttled them. They just lost the shootout. I mean, so if that's your kind of whole thing, they're 60th in defense, they're 6th in offense. And I was on a pod earlier today with ECB, and everyone was like, their offense, I know it's 6th, but it doesn't feel like that. And I'm like, I think it's the opposite. I think their defense just might be worse than 60th. I think it just might be a number we look at and go, it's getting worse, and it's heading in the direction where we hope. If you're a Gonzaga fan, you have to hope it gets better sooner rather than later. Problem is, the WCC is not easy, and their schedule doesn't get any easier. They play Portland 3-16 in KenPom. This is in order the next couple of games. Oregon State 62nd, St. Mary's 27th. St. Mary's can win both those games straight up. They just can.
No, absolutely. And that's kind of the thing that worries me a little bit with Gonzaga is we're entering they don't control their own destiny territory, which is not a great spot to be. So
for what it's worth, St. Mary's at St. Mary's, they're projected to win by 1. And then at home, third game from the end of the regular season, they're projected to win by 6. A lot can change, but that's probably the closest that matchup has ever been, and ever maybe at this point. So, any other team you want to pluck there, or it seems like Gonzaga is a big one, so we spent some time.
I know we gave this is sort of like a back end of the top 25 team for me entering the season, but I know we gave Wake Forest a lot of love, and I just haven't seen it really from Wake Forest. Like, Hunter Salas has absolutely had his moments, but on the whole, I expected a lot more. I expected a lot more of like an offensive punch from this Wake Forest team that I feel like I haven't seen consistently. So
they don't have a point guard. That's their biggest problem. They don't have a point guard. Cam Hilder's just not a point guard. Tyler Johnson, sure. Like, give me 20 minutes of that. That's great. But yeah, they just don't have a point guard. But in the ACC this year,
do you think Wake Forest is better if Boopie Miller doesn't transfer?
I'm gonna have to tread carefully on my answer for reasons unbeknownst to the listeners. I think they're better because at least he can. But he's not even like, his scoring presence the last 3 years has been incredible. Like, he's a good point guard, and he would be better than what they have now. Yes. So just based on statistically A to B, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That would be a really easy segue into the ACC, but we'll end with that. So a team that, I actually ask it this way. Are you surprised that Arkansas is where it is? And then remind me and the listeners, where did you have them relative to now that they would be? Because there were people like this transfer class, John L. Davis. There was people like Elite Eight, people buying tickets to San Antonio.
Yeah, I bought Arkansas as like I think I had them right around the top 15 entering the season, like just inside. But it was kind of a weird, they were one of those teams where I was like, roster talent wise, like I feel like I have to put them in the top 15. But like projecting forward, it's like, I don't know if I expect them to be one of because where did I have them like relative to other SEC teams? Like 1, 2. Yeah, like looking back, it's like I didn't really think they were the third best SEC team entering the season, but it just felt like from a roster standpoint, you kind of had to put them there. And yeah, they haven't been good. They've been actually bad, I would say. What if they open SEC play 0-5, and
They have a
it's
chance to be 0-6 on I think it's Wednesday. They play. I'm pulling it up now as we talked about it on ECB this morning. They play Mississippi. No, excuse me. They play Georgia. Georgia comes to Arkansas. They
Georgia's
can
sneaky
they
good
can
too.
lose that one 100%. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh
they
yeah.
probably will. So
Yeah, and I saw it today, like after the Missouri game, Cal was talking about how Boogie Flynn is kind of dealing with a hand injury. And if that's like a lingering issue, they're just cooked. Like they're done. Like he's been basically the only positive for them this entire season. Like Janelle Davis, I thought he was going to come in. He was a guy with, you know, I thought potentially like first team All SEC, like borderline All American level upside,
yeah,
and he just hasn't been good. He's averaging like 8 points a game. Um, it's really just been Boogie Flynn. Like the whole team is inefficient. Like nobody can shoot. From anywhere on the floor. It's not good. It's really bad. The press conferences are weird. Like the Cal's
yeah.
answers to things, like it's just a very bizarre situation. It makes me wonder who had the bigger miscalculation last offseason, whether it was Arkansas bringing in John Calipari um, after the way things transpired towards the end of his tenure at Kentucky, or if Cal made a bigger miscalculation staying in the SEC. Like if Cal had gone and taken some ACC job, I don't think we'd be having these conversations. But he decided to stay in this gauntlet of a conference with his old, his ex girlfriend, and they get absolutely dominated. And it's just not a good look. And he might be. I did have the crazy thought, honestly, like before this show. What are the odds he like takes the Miami job? Like what if he just doesn't Cal feel like he could take the Miami job? He feels like a Miami guy to me.
Oh, 1,000%. Like
Yeah.
it would just be the same Arkansas problems, but in South Beach, and all the money would be, I want to say the same. I'd say similar, right? Tyson Foods, Miami. How legal the money is in Miami, I guess, would be the better question. But I mean, I was going to ask you this, but I think you're 100% right. Like, where does Arkansas, like, because they have to be somewhat to blame. Arkansas, the Tyson food family. Like, I made the joke this morning, like the price of because of all these players and the price of Tyson foods is going up. Chicken nuggets are going to cost a lot of money because these checks are going to bounce. These players suck, and like the whole just aura around the team, and like you mentioned, the press conferences. My thing is, like, what do you do? Like, if he takes a Miami job, like it's going to cost $1 trillion to buy him out.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
but like that never matters anymore. The only reason it mattered
True.
in Kentucky is because he had clauses in his contract that none of us knew about until that very moment about, well, if he has to talk to this, then he has to tell them this. And it's like, who cares? Like none of that matters anymore. Like, but what do you do if you're Arkansas? Do you run this back and you just say, like, you have one more year and that's it? Like, I think that both are in purgatory right now.
It's a really bad situation on the Arkansas side specifically, because you think about these teams like in Arkansas, like a Kansas State, like in Indiana, have to mention Indiana, opened up the NIL war chest to like infuse millions of dollars into building a roster. And then you think with the performances for each of those teams this season, you think when you go back to the boosters, when you go back to the donors, and you're like, hey, we're trying to compete this season, you think they're going to be more likely to give you money to like shell out big bucks so you can be a complete disaster? Like this is just it's not a good proof of concept year for Cal at all. And I think it only makes it tougher in the future to get investment and buy-in into the program, which you kind of need, especially in the SEC where you have so many of these great coaches and so many of these great rosters. I don't know what you do, because if you don't turn the ship around like now, it gets even more difficult next year because you're going to have guys who want to leave. And it's just going to get tougher from a financial standpoint to stay competitive.
The issue is I have zero faith in Calipari ever being a good coach again. Like I've just reached that point, and I don't think in any way that's outlandish. I don't.
No,
I had him 17 before the season for what it's worth. I pulled it up.
Okay, yeah, I think I had them 13 or 14.
Like you mentioned, SEC teams ahead of them though. Like, okay, I don't think I had this X, Y, and Z team. I had SEC teams ahead of them. I had Tennessee 14th, Auburn 13th, A&M 12th, I had Alabama first. So I had 4 SEC. I had them as the 5th best SEC team.
Okay, yeah. See, I only had Bama and Auburn, which was definitely a miscalculation. I did have them, I think, just ahead of Kentucky.
I
I don't
was
know if that
pushing
was an
Aggie
engagement.
propaganda more than
Yeah,
anybody other than Aggie people. Okay, like it was bad, and they're good. So I'm proud of that one. So,
yeah. I did in the run from 13 to 18 in my preseason rankings. So that's 6 spots. I had 5 SEC teams in that 6 spot range. So I had a bunch of them grouped together.
and they're all. It may not be the 5 you had, but they're all good. They're all
Yeah.
really good. Nobody thought Ole Miss Mississippi State would be this good. To your point though, like the reason I brought up like just the lack of faith and belief in him is like, and why I think things go south before they go anywhere remotely heading north. Um, like you mentioned the job and like Miami and like what if he had taken this or done this or whatever. Like I just kind of scrolled through KenPom and just went through in my head like what jobs were open this offseason.
Mhm.
And I'm not again, Arkansas has to be somewhat to blame. Like the program, the organization, and the school as a whole has to be to blame for somewhat because like they all saw the same thing we saw. They all saw that, oh well, he was terrible down the stretch, but he can buy talent and bring it here.
Yeah.
Like, sure. Like, but that's like irrational levels of delusion to think that like because if you just watch the product on the floor, it's been bad for a while. Like
Yeah.
that
Oh,
Oakland
absolutely.
loss should have put every nail in his coaching coffin for the next 3 to 5 years. Like
Mhm.
I'm not shocked he was. I mean, he was headed to the Patino path. I mean, Patino did things off the court that got him heading on his path, and now he's kind of revitalized his legacy. But like Patino left the country for crying out loud. He went to
Yeah.
Greece. And then I mean, whatever you want, whatever you think about New Rochelle, New York, I mean, that felt like, okay, well, you got to rebuild your resume. Let's do it in Iona. I mean, no disrespect to Iona, but good grief. Coaching in the MAC for crying out loud. I mean, that league hasn't been that exciting ever. And then he shows up. My point is I look at the list of like offseason availability. Michigan, they're 11th in KenPom. Dusty May was getting that job. That was their guy all along. I refuse anybody to argue otherwise. Um, I mean, and then you have to scroll for quite some time before Louisville. Louisville wasn't after what happened with Payne. They weren't touching, especially where Payne ended up at Arkansas with Cal. They weren't touching him with a 400-foot pole. Uh, there's some schools that may have moved on in other directions. But again, all that hypothetical. I'm just going off what was open. West Virginia, like you mentioned, is that the equivalent of him taking an ACC job at the time? Probably. West Virginia has been in basketball, purgatory. I keep using that word, but it's true. Ever since what happened with Huggins, the list is getting shorter. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just scrolling. There's not really been availability that you're like, okay, so like, where would he have gone? Like it, I
Right.
thought it was going to be way further down than where he ended up. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
still
a it's
scrolling.
a
And I can't
mess.
think
Like
of the other
he
teams.
probably should go the mid-major route at this point, and I just don't think he's ever gonna do that.
100%, he's not. I mean, I'm
I think
literally still.
this,
I'm in the 80s, and there's not a single
yeah.
team that I would
I
have
think
thought.
the status and the money and all of it, just I think it matters a little bit too much to him uh, to kind of take that shot to his ego to be coaching at like I don't know Temple. Like I don't know. Like I just
Holtman's been at DePaul. What? This is his first year, right?
yeah, you're one.
So, I mean, we're talking 104th in KenPom at that point. I'm still scrolling. There's not. We're into the Sun Belt conversation now, and that's the whole
Right.
point. There's 3 jobs that were realistic until you get into the hundreds in KenPom. So
Yeah.
that's just where it is, and I think everybody's to blame. And I think it's one of those situations that, at this point, unless they turn it around and they make the Sweet 16 next year somehow, some way, with a roster that's got 13 new players again, like we all anticipate year to year with someone like him, I just, I mean, it's irreparable. Like it just is what it is. Speaking of irreparable, let's very quickly close with this. I asked you for 30 minutes. We'll get out of here after that. We got one more thing to do. What's wrong with the ACC in recent memory? Is there like a flag that Carl's been wanting to plant for a while and just hasn't? Because honestly, as someone who Maryland, I know we're pretty young comparatively to where Maryland was for a long time and in our lifetime. I remember when they were in the ACC, obviously, but let's be honest, we don't remember them that way anymore. Like it, it's for it to be the greatest basketball conference in the history of college basketball, and then all of a sudden, in a matter of 10 years or less, it's not. Something's changed. So I just think this year is like shining even more of a negative note, and deservingly so. So go wherever you want with it, but it's kind of bad. Like Miami's kind of the thing that pushed me over the edge and went, okay, this is officially DEFCON 5.
Yeah, it is one of those like macro level questions that I think is really hard to pinpoint a specific reason why, and maybe some of it is just the highs and lows of over the years. Like maybe we'll in 15 years, like the ACC will be considered the best conference in college basketball again. Like you never
We're a
know
long way
how
from
those
that.
things turn out.
15 years, it would have to be some of the best 15 years of, because I know the SEC is recent, but the Big
Yeah,
12 is semi recent too. Like it's not far enough away. We're only a few years away from Carolina and Duke playing in a Final Four and everyone being like, oh my God. Like it, we're not that far off of it being elite. Why so bad so recently?
yeah. I think it's a combination of things. I think for one, as far as most recently, the conference is way too big. First of all,
Well, yeah,
too many teams, way too many
good
teams.
start. Yeah.
Secondly, I think you've had the end of an era with some of these, all-time great coaches retiring over the past few years. Talk about
That's
Coach
it.
K, retired. Why am I blanking on
Roy Williams.
Carolina's?
Roy Williams.
Roy Williams. I was going to say
Right.
Roy Hibbert. I was like, why am I from Georgetown? I'm just Georgetown brained right now. This is crazy. Boeheim retired. Tony Bennett retired like a week
Who,
before.
by the way, Boeheim, most of his career, Big East guy. So just kind of funny to think about again, like your point about the conference changing.
Yeah, so you have Bennett, Larinaga out this year. You have Mike Bray, who retired.
Who looks like he's having the time of his life not
Yeah,
coaching basketball, which is kind of funny to think about.
honestly, Leonard Hamilton is probably next to go the way things are trending.
I could stand on good ground. I'm not gonna throw anybody under the bus here. I can stand on good ground. This is his last year.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll leave it at that.
I think you're seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard as far as like coaches go, and so you have a few guys coming in all at once who are trying to establish themselves, establish their program's identity. Like, what is our program going to look like? So I think that's part of it. And then I know with a few programs specifically, I guess I don't know enough about every single ACC team to say with certainty if this is an issue, but I know for a team like Pitt in previous years, it's been the scheduling is just so bad. Like to the point where you get to March and it's like you're either not battle tested once you get there or you scheduled like such a poor non-conference schedule that if you take losses, then you're just screwed. And if you don't, then you don't really get the benefit of the doubt against some of these other programs who scheduled like better than you. Like Michigan State, like if you look at just Michigan State's win percentage over the last couple of years, they were like, I don't know. They drop a ton of games in the non-conference schedule, but it's because they play such a tough schedule. And then you get into like Pitt's non-conference and they're playing like a ton of Q3 and Q4 games
Coppin
that I
State,
feel like don't give them the benefit of the doubt. But
what's crazy though is the tournament success, albeit like I get what you're saying, but like the ACC has the most wins in the NCAA tournament in the last like 3 years. I'd have to double check
then
exactly
do you
if
still
that's still
think something
true.
is wrong with the ACC?
I 100% do.
Okay.
I'm not panicking. I know, but I'm just making sure people realize like if it's ultimately based on tournament success, and that's like I'm in the backyard of it. Like I see it. I see DEFCON 5 every day. Like it is to the point where like I'm not going to name any names, but there are some local folks here that cover the sport locally that I mean it is ACC toot horn or nothing, and they want to make fun of the SEC all the time in some way possible. A lot of it's football based. I get it. But like it is literally like anything Paul Feinbaum says, it's like Satan said it. Like, and I'm like, let's look ourselves in the mirror and go, okay, if it's ultimately all tournament success, that's great. But the perception of the conference has to matter. The perception of the conference, clearly, college basketball people, even down to our level of like non-national folks, the conference does not look that fondly. I mean, you had John Rothstein last year talking about the Mountain West is going to have 6 teams, and the ACC is going to have 2, and then he looks like an idiot when the ACC does what they do last year.
Yeah.
But I still believe that the perception of the conference is really bad. My point being is I'm going to read you the top teams that have more than 4 wins this year, 4 or more wins. This is from top to bottom. Duke, Clemson, Louisville, Wake Forest, North Carolina at 5-2. I'm just going off conference record to be fair to these teams, right? Mm-hmm. Because North Carolina, we all know how we feel about that. SMU, Florida State, Stanford. That's it. How many of those teams are true legacy, helps the ACC out year to year teams? Duke. That's it. Because Louisville's not an ACC old original. And I should probably hang that thought process up because that's just how far removed we are from that. But like Duke, Clemson, until recently, till Brownell just maybe it takes, people say like maybe it takes 3 years to finally see something in the NFL. With Brownell, maybe it takes 15 years to finally see something as a head coach. I just don't know. Like the last 3 years have been insane. Louisville, Pat Kelsey's first year. Wake Forest, Steve Forbes. This is the first. They've not made the NCAA tournament. This is his final chance, probably. If they don't make it this year, things are starting to get hairy. North Carolina, Hubert Davis, hot seat as hot as ever. SMU's not an ACC team as of recent. It's their first year. Florida State, as you just mentioned, head coach on the way out. Stanford, like what are we talking? Stanford's 4-3. They were voted 18th or 17th. Like, so purgatory: Miami, Boston College, Virginia, Georgia Tech, California, NC State, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and Pittsburgh right now. And I think Pittsburgh's really good. I think that's a team that'll be better as they get healthier. But my point being is the national perception of that, the only thing people care about is Duke.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, collectively, I think the ACC has done a pretty poor job of like understanding how, like, I feel like there's been kind of this groundswell from like the Big 12, almost like a collaborative effort in the Big 12 to be like, here's what we need to do to get a large, representation into the tournament. And then I think it was like last year, 2 years ago, you have, the ACC is bringing in Joe Lunardi to talk about like how to get teams into the NCAA tournament. It's like, have you seen where he ranks on the bracket matrix? Like, do you think he has a good understanding of what makes an NCAA tournament team? Like, that's the guy that you're going to help you solve these problems. No hate to Joe Lunardi at all. Like he absolutely pioneered the bracketology movement, but it's like,
but the matrix is what it is. You're right.
Yeah. You're just like concerned about the wrong things. Like you're talking to the wrong people. I think there was a press conference last year where Capel was like, he gave like an 11 or 12-minute answer about just how the ACC needed to be better, how they needed to get more teams in the tournament. And I feel like that in and of itself kind of showed how they were a little bit behind the 8 ball compared to like the SEC and the Big 12 with regards to like dissecting the net and like how to improve your team's like standing in the net. Cause that is something that they use on the team sheets. So I don't know. There's a lot of things at play. I'm not going to pretend to know like all of the dynamics and the issues at play, but to your point, it's not good.
Yeah, it's insane thought process to think that Pat Kelsey is potentially the ACC's saving hope. It's the truth. I love Pat Kelsey. I do. I've watched him for a couple of years covering Charleston. Like, it's one of the best dudes in college basketball. The tweet the other day or yesterday about the text he sent to the 40-year ticket holder, like all that stuff matters. He's doing all the right things. But Louisville's a legacy program, and for them to be at the low, I think that matters. I think you mentioned the coaches in and out, but like 2 years to Louisville recently, like that hurts the conference more than I think people understood. So I think stuff like that. I think you're right. I think it's a big boiling pot of turds that are just meshing together the last 4 years. And they've just, again, I don't think Virginia's headed in the right direction. I don't think Miami's headed in the right direction. And all this, by the way, could change. Dusty May took over Michigan, and Michigan wasn't really bad. Like, they've been Michigan for the last 10, 15 years, but like they were closer to Miami right now than they were to not being Miami. And Dusty May comes in and immediately changes the perception of the program immediately. So that could happen to Miami. The problem is who's going to do that. I don't know.
Right.
So,
and there's other influences too. I think like there was a time in the not so distant past where we were legitimate because of like football related reasons. We're talking about the ACC potentially just dissolving as a conference with like,
ridiculous,
absolutely insane. But it's like, I don't know. It almost feels like a lot of top down issues that are kind of trickling down and impacting the basketball product.
You're 1,000% right. And like, I want to be clear to folks that maybe listening to this, maybe new to Karl, whatever, that everything I say about the ACC is always rooted in the basketball interest, because ultimately football is a losing battle. It is. They are lying to themselves when they say it's not. But like, to your point about top down, and I don't want to get too far into it, but like Jim Phillips is one of the most interesting people that continues to put his chest out for a conference and constantly realize it's a losing battle and not actually fixing something. Like, he goes to these big conversations with all these conferences, like College Football Game Day, all that stuff, and it's like just the proverbial image of a guy putting his chest out and being proud. You should be. Obviously, you're the commissioner of a conference, but you're doing it, and like it's the equivalent of a 5-year-old doing it in a fight with like an adult. Like, it's a losing battle. You're
Right.
putting your chest out and you're puffing it out and being all excited, and then you're fighting a losing battle if you don't actually fix things. So
Yeah. And
again,
what
it's
I
not entirely
with the conference, like it's too big. And like if you thought that these issues were going to be fixed by adding Cal and Stanford, like maybe academically that gives you a better standing as like a collection of schools.
the history of those athletically. I understood that part of it. Like Stanford's won like the Governor's Cup for like what 8 of the last like 15 years or something stupid like that. They're like one of the most dominant athletic teams across the board in every sport. I get why they added those two. SMU, I could money. It's a money thing. It is what it is.
Yeah. I just don't know. Like, I don't know as a non ACC, like as an ACC outsider, I don't know how much that, like, when I saw that they were joining the conference, not being in the weeds, I was like, I don't think that really, that doesn't bump up my perception of the ACC at all.
It doesn't. No. Yeah. If anything, it was the opposite. People thought it was stupid, and they were right. So, good win for the haters. No, so like, I mean, again, you can sit here and nitpick. Like, Boston College probably needs to be in the Big East, and think you could literally go down the list of just different things like that. And like, obviously, they would be DePaul at that point. But no offense, DePaul, but there's just a lot, like you said. I think the best thing you said in the last 15 minutes is the fact that it's just there's too many things working against it, and so. All right, on the way out here, when we scheduled this, TikTok was going away. And the idea, like I was literally recording a podcast a couple hours before we're doing this, and my wife sent me a TikTok. I looked down and it was like, wife has sent you this. And I was like, what? Like I like genuinely had no idea that it was back because I wasn't on social media at the time. And so let's just pretend like there's a lot in limbo. Stuff still has to happen. This is not the political podcast for that. However, though, just I know you and some other folks, and I appreciate the tag and I appreciate the thought process and just kind of where you guys' head was at. Ryan was another one. Is there like, I mean, just this is your soundboard for a second. Like it shook the sports community to a core a little bit. It did.
It did a little bit. And like you said, there's still a lot, I think, that's in limbo and yet to be figured out. Like it was restored today, but we don't know how permanent of a basis that will be. So I don't know. I'm kind of hoping for the best, assuming the worst moving forward. And just as I've been thinking about it the last couple of days, I've been kind of split with my thoughts on it. Like in the one sense, it's an app. Like I'm not going to get bent out of shape about a video app. Like my life will go on. I'm thankful that I feel for the people absolutely who make a living off of the content that they post on TikTok. Like there's some people who that is how they earn a living wage. And so like I really feel for those people because I think that's a good example. It's absolutely catastrophic for them. I'm thankful to not be in that position, but I feel for those people a lot. So there's that sense where it's like my life will go on without TikTok. Like I will find another solution without TikTok. I will be okay. But then there's another sense where it's like, no, like I am like upset about this. Like I do care very much because TikTok for me was the thing that really legitimized, I think, the work I was doing in the college basketball space. Like I was approaching it kind of a different way than a lot of the traditional media. And I've gotten to do a lot of cool things as a result. Like it's such a sick platform that I've had the opportunity to do so many cool things because of it that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Like I'm sure we would have met at some point because the college basketball circle is not very big at the end of the day. Like I'm sure we would have crossed paths, but like I don't know that I'd be on this podcast like if it wasn't for TikTok. Like the connections that
you 1,000% would not, because I would have never found you guys.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I mean, meeting you, like I've gotten to know Ryan. I've met like GFed in real life. Like I met up with him and like we made videos together, and it was like that's the kind of thing that I am like really sad about. This is like my biggest platform. It has been a connecting place for me and something that has really helped kind of enhance my work and my visibility in the college basketball space. Cause like I didn't go to school for journalism. I didn't really start doing anything in college basketball until after I graduated college. So this was the kind of thing that gave me a boost into that space. Like I'm probably not credentialed at Georgetown today if it's not for TikTok. Like there's a lot of things that I'm very thankful to TikTok for. And there's so much at play. Like I don't want to get like super political with it, but it just made me upset seeing like a lot of the hearings and people just completely misunderstanding the technology and kind of putting out straw man arguments about why this app is such an issue. I won't deny that there are like maybe some national security concerns with it. Like I did I did an internship a while ago in cybersecurity, so I feel like I can speak on it a little bit. But also, like it is also a thinly veiled effort from a very large corporation to monopolize the content space. Like we can call it for what it is. Like there's a lot of lobbying going on. There's a lot of money changing hands, and so it's a little dirty from that standpoint. So there's some things that I am like a little upset about, a little sketched out about. But I think I kind of just at the end of the day I fell into like I'm sad like that it might go away because it's been the easiest platform for me to like build and grow and get visibility, and the others have not come along as easily. And so the thought of having to put that much more effort into trying to figure out YouTube or Instagram or whatever is not something I'm super excited about. And for a guy like GFed, who I've talked with, like TikTok was kind of how he was funding a lot of these trips where he's going to these stadiums and he's going to these fields and stuff. And so now it's like, what does that look like for him and his content? Because he's doing that full time, like if the app is gone. So I don't know. It's upsetting. I will be okay, thankfully, but I definitely feel for the people, like I said, who things will get hard without it.
No, he did an incredible video. I'll leave it at, I'll let people go. I will link it in the description, the whole thing. He did an incredible video just talking about like he understands that content needs what he does. Like it's a weird thing to say out loud for somebody that maybe doesn't understand it. But like at the end of the day, even if it's something you do full time or whatever, the construct of how we view and appreciate content, especially in something like college football, college basketball. I mean, heck, there's communities that we don't even know about that exist because of that. And even if people look at it like, okay, well, the X, Y, and Z, whatever, you could just move over to this. I've seen it. Like it's the politicians aren't even the ones saying it. It's the people that don't understand what, like your point about it being like the one that's grown the most. Like people may look at that as like, what's the easiest one to build? And it's like, it's not true. But like the same people saying stuff like that are the same people that have never tried to put a YouTube channel together. Like, I envy some guys in the space that just have used TikTok to their advantage. They make, hey, this is what we do, short form, kind of click you in a little bit, right? And then it redirects you to YouTube. And now I've got friends that have 2, 3, even 10,000 followers or subscribers on YouTube because of the content they make on TikTok. It's insane to think about like how people are using it. And I brought up the whole like sports community thing and like how we'll always be stronger, we'll always be better, kind of iron fist or whatever. But like people just don't understand like it's going to leave a void in some of these communities. And this isn't exclusive to college basketball, but I just know that I think you were going to give us good perspective on it, and you did. That like building a YouTube audience is one of the hardest things to do in content. It just is. And so the fact that people like us are saying that and we don't do this full time, I think should give people a real reality to how much this is really going to change things. So again, all that I had all this planned in my head, and I'm sure you did too when we originally texted about this, and didn't expect to quote unquote get it back between. I mean, literally, we're talking 48 hours. I was like, hey, want to do this, and the next thing you know, oh, and it's back. Whatever. By the time this goes out, it may have already been fixed. Like it's going to be that stupid, but we will. I think ultimately things will kind of head in the right direction. I get it's political. I get their security concerns. Like that's you kind of laid out all that, but from just the community standpoint and how we view building these things, it does suck. And like I'm somebody saying that I have 700 followers or whatever. Like it's one of those things. Like I just understand its impact and why it's going away, and why it shouldn't be going away. So, on a brighter note, congratulations on the Commanders making the NFC Championship for the first time in your lifetime. If I got that stat right. Yes. Yeah.
Definitely the first time in a lifetime. I think the first time in like 40 years or something.
Yeah. So congrats, right? Congratulations, first of all. Enjoy Jaden Daniels because, man, I mean, I'm not an NFL podcaster. I'm not an NFL blogger. I don't do any of that stuff. I watch it every single Sunday like every other American does. And like eventually you get a guy that plays 179 games in college. I'm exaggerating the number, obviously. But that has to matter. And like, he's just built for it. And so I didn't have a point. We weren't really going to get into it, but I just wanted to extend a congratulations because
I was wrong about Jaden Daniels. I'll admit that. I wanted Drake May. So I'm
well, thank you, because we love him. We love him in New England. So thank you. Yeah. We are adoring him. He just got engaged. Everything's going great. Mike Vrabel, enjoy the seat for a while, but Drake May's coming. So no, I'm joking. But all jokes aside, thank you for coming today. It's been really fun. First podcast back in a while, and just wanted to kind of go through some fun college basketball stuff with you, and want to do this again, obviously before and around the tournament as well. And so before we get out of here, plug away at anything that you're working on making. I know TikTok kind of ruins all of that, but yeah, talk me through it. What's up?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Always good to be here. Also my first pod back in a while, so apologies to you or the audience if I was rambly or nonsensical. I did my best. But just to plug stuff, like, I don't know, you can find me at Gym Range Pod on TikTok for however long that exists, Instagram, YouTube as well. If TikTok does eventually go down, I will probably transition into making more long form type YouTube, like video essay content. So we'll see. I'll try my hand at that, and we'll see how it goes. But that's kind of the plan moving forward if things take a turn. And then my personal is on the screen at K Heiser CBB. So you can find me on X, where I tweet about Maryland and Georgetown and the like, and just whatever comes to mind. So that's where you can find me.
And the occasional 2 million view in tweet, I'll just be casually scrolling and be like, oh, I wonder who this funny guy is, and it'll be you, and I'll be like, oh my god, and this tweet has 600,000 views. You can't get that kind of content anywhere else.
Every now and then I have a good thought that does well. So
I've told you this off air 1,000 times. We're getting into sicko stuff. I'll actually link it below. The Delaware one last year at the CAA tournament. That was one of the funniest things you've ever said, and it did not get the numbers it deserved. And shout out to Delaware, shout out to their team. But yeah, that was quite the fun tweet there. So you can get all that there at K Heiser CBB. Again, appreciate you as always. This has been the 2-Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett on behalf of Karl, Jimmer Range, Alex, everybody around their camp. This has been the 2-Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. We'll see you next time.